What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be joined by Brian Kamenetzky from Locked On Lakers. The Lakers sign veteran point guard Dennis Schroder, his second go-around with the LA Lakers. Does this mean that a Russell Westbrook trade is on the horizon? And if not, are the Lakers effectively punting on a year of LeBron James still at the top of his game? We're going to break it all down for you in just a second after a message from our friends over at RocketMoney. Do you know how much subscriptions really cost? Most Americans think they spend around, $80 or so a month on subscription services when the actual total is closer to $200 or more. That's right. You could be wasting hundreds of dollars each and every month on subscriptions that you don't even know about sometimes. RocketMoney is the app that I love using that takes care of that problem for me. It's formerly known as Truebill. The app shows you all your subscriptions in one place and cancels what you don't want or need anymore. RocketMoney can even find subscriptions that you didn't know that you were paying for. You may even find out you've been double charged for certain subscriptions. To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel. You click the button and RocketMoney takes care of the rest. You can cancel unnecessary subscriptions with RocketMoney starting today. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Seriously, it could save you hundreds of dollars per year. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Joining us now is Brian Kamenetzky from Locked On Lakers. You can follow on Twitter at Cam Brothers. Now, Brian, back for part two with the LA Lakers, Dennis Schroder. This is the most important question I think we got to answer off the surface. Does this mean that Dennis Schroder is going to now go get another LA Lakers tattoo? Because he gets a tattoo of every team he plays for. So does this mean he goes back and gets another Lakers tattoo? Because he got a Rockets tattoo. He's only here for half a season.
I honestly didn't even know that. So like, this is my opening question for Media Day. I'm very excited to kind of tackle this. I can't think of things that are more important than finding out the answer to this question.
And if so, does he go with like a retro, like an old school, like logo? Does he go with an alternate logo?
Yeah. It depends on what the first one looked like. I mean, or you just little squared like next to it. I don't know.
Right. There we go.
Guy's played for a lot of teams of late. So I mean, he's got to be run out of real estate.
I mean, imagine if Ish Smith did, every team that he played for got a tattoo. He'd run out, overnight. All right. No, let's get to the real big question here. And that's the fact that writing on the wall here, the acquisition of Patrick Beverley, now Dennis Schroder, is this another domino where you say, all right, maybe things are trending towards a Russ deal, despite the fact that it feels like every piece of media being pushed out there says the Lakers have zero intentions of trading Russell Westbrook and that they want to run it back with him and that he's going to be in LA this season, all of that.
I'll push back a little bit. They have every intention of trying to trade Russell Westbrook, and they're perfectly willing to trade Russell Westbrook. What they aren't willing to do is trade Westbrook at any cost. And so, but that is actually different than the sort of the assumptions, particularly at the beginning of the offseason, which was just like, they cannot possibly bring him back. So regardless of how much it sucks, regardless of how bitter a pill you have to swallow, you got to swallow it. You got to take the medicine. And they have come off of that position to whatever extent it was theirs to begin with. And so I think it makes it easier to trade him. I think it makes it so you have a credible backcourt and like a lot of, good players back there and whatever, should the opportunity come. But I don't think, the Beverly deal, I don't think the Schroeder deal really have much to do with the timing of a potential Westbrook deal. Because we know what the deals are. They can take Utah's flotsam and jetsam, and, Utah can try to extract as much value from the Lakers as possible, or they can do the Indiana deal. Those seem to be the only things that are available.
And I think it was actually your brother and co-host who kind of commented on this, that the whole Dennis Schroder situation with the Lakers is kind of hilarious in the fact that you look at it and like, all right, the Lakers gave up a first to get Dennis Schroder. Then they wanted to overpay him. Then they didn't overpay him, which led directly into the Russell Westbrook trade. And now they have Schroder on a vet minimum deal and are deciding whether or not they want to give up more first to get rid of Russell Westbrook, which is just the weirdest, like, vicious circle, whatever you want to call it, 30 for 30. I don't know. It's kind of crazy to think about.
It is another example of asset management issues that the team has. And you look at it and,
putting it mildly,
they also didn't get anything for Schroeder when when he left. And like, so it's like, it's just this extraordinary set of mismanaged options here, and it echoes what they did with Talen Horton-Tucker, where they gave him the wrong contract and then gave him too big a contract, and then it wasn't long enough years, and then they signed Westbrook, or they traded for Westbrook, and basically made it impossible for THT to find a role that really worked for him, and then they and you end up having to unload him for a 34-year-old player, and no question that Beverly is a more useful and better player for this team than THT was, but it's not what you want to be doing, and how. And so you start to these mistakes, small versions of them and large versions of them, like the Westbrook deal, are really starting to pile up here with the Lakers and this administration. And so I think the bringing back of Schroder is not a bad idea in a vacuum, but it does represent an incredible turn of events that highlights how bad they've been at managing their assets.
Is it, when you kind of look at that, right, kind of an encapsulation of some of what's been going on with the Lakers for a front office and executive in Pelinka who is basically more or less gift wrapped two of the best NBA players in the league, right? Mm-hmm. LeBron James picks LA, and AD is like, I want to go to LA, and he's not going anywhere else. So even though LA had to give up a lot to get AD, that was basically going to happen. Past those two things, though, I mean, it feels like a lot of the management outside of acquiring those two players, which again was largely their choice, has just been terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I will. They put together a team that was better than expected, I think, for where the pieces paid off better with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. Markieff Morris turned into a very good pickup by the playoffs, and that title season was obviously that you got to be a pretty good roster.
You have to give credit for that. Yes,
right,
absolutely.
And so I think they did some good things there. It didn't work, but I will say I supported the roster changes that they made coming out of the title season into the next year, because I didn't think you could play that late in the season, run it back the same way. I just did. I think you needed some different energy there. You needed some new legs and people who hadn't been coming off that same title run. And they were a good team until that team fell apart. So I can excuse the second season with, in terms of who they put on the roster. Last year was a bleep show. And it was an avoidable one because you knew everything that was going to come if you traded Westbrook. Like, now you're going to be building this team with minimum guys. You've traded away all of your depth, and you have to, put yourself on this treadmill where they currently still stand. And they, I think they did a little better job this year with their 1-year deals than they did the year before, but they're still on this series of 1-year deals where you have to kind of take what you can get. It's very difficult to put together a coherent roster, and that's how you end up with 6 guards, basically no wings, and very few ways of getting their best players on the floor without sacrificing other potential strengths that they have.
Yeah, I don't know who's experiencing more of a wing shortage right now, the LA Lakers or Wingstop, having to sell chicken thighs instead of wings.
It's amazing how allergic they seem to be to the idea of getting real live wings, like guys who can credibly play the 2-3, certainly even more so the 3-4. And this is not new. This was a problem last year. This is a problem even when they were better. Rob Pelinka just doesn't seem to think that this position is particularly important. And now you hear reports that, obviously LeBron can still get out there and do that, but you don't want him guarding, wings and, the Jason Tatums of the world and all that, throughout a season. And, they signed Juan Toscano-Anderson, who's a nice player, but, where do you play him if Troy Brown, who has some defensive pedigree with him, is pretty well regarded on that side of the ball, but hard to get on the floor, not a stretch guy. And when you have 19 guards that all seem to need to play, somebody's got to sit. So now they got to go super duper small. And there are reports that they're really heavily considering using Patrick Beverly as a primary wing defender. And look, Pat Bev has guarded up through most of his career, and he can do it or whatever. But I don't think it makes me overly cynical to worry about a plan that hinges guarding some of the best players in the league with a 6'1", 34-year-old point guard who gets hurt for 35 games a year. That just doesn't seem to be a really good plan.
Not a sustainable recipe for
I
success.
don't think so. I don't believe it is. And
Now,
I love Pat Bev. As a player, he fits really well with what they need, but that is a terrible, unsustainable idea.
I guarantee to Lakers fans everywhere, Pat Bev will become the second favorite Laker on the team behind LeBron by game 25. Like, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
A last thing for you here, Brian, and I find myself sitting here wondering that, if this Lakers team doesn't decide that they need to, move on from Russell Westbrook at whatever cost that may be, I can't help but sit here and think that it's crazy to think that the Lakers will have then potentially, punted, for lack of better terminology, maybe on 2 years of having LeBron James in purple and gold, which is kind of crazy to think about because they punted on that first year. And if you actively choose not to move on from Russell Westbrook this season, you are effectively punting yet again.
Yes and no, because you are, but if you make a trade that doesn't really make you any better, you're punting anyway, except now you're going forward into the future with less stuff and less flexibility. And I think Pelinka's one of his huge flaws is that he overvalues cap space and undervalues the potential creativity that most GMs seem to have. But, if we have players, we can create things, we can move things around. He is, obsessed with cap space. But the Utah deals that are out there, for example, those don't improve the Lakers very much. And so, if you have to unload a first round pick and certainly 2 first round picks to get Bogdanovich and, Jordan Clarkson and pick another player, they're really not any closer to a title. You can make an argument, I think, for the Indiana deal. I think that's a better one for the Lakers. Miles Turner is the best player that's going to be traded in any of these scenarios. Buddy Hield fills an obvious need. But they're punting if they make a bad trade anyway. You just win a couple weeks of press conferences. And now there isn't even that much summer left to do press conferences. So I don't know what they gain. They are
you win media day. How's that? There you go.
Maybe, but this was a 2-year experiment that they knew or should have known that if it didn't work, they were going to be kind of screwed for 2 years because unloading that contract is not easy.
So as things currently stand, if you were Rob Pelinka, if you had the GM hat on, you're just ready to buckle into one more season of Russ and let him fall off the books and see what you can kind of salvage after that?
I would see if I could, force Indiana's hand here, maybe get some sort of favorable protections on picks or something with that, with that trade. I would probably, if that is still out there, where if the Lakers include that second pick, they can trade Westbrook and bring back Hield and Turner, I would probably do that. But if that's not really a choice, or Indiana is not willing to play ball, or they're just waiting, Indiana doesn't have a lot of incentive to make that deal now either if they don't particularly want to have Westbrook on their hands. I would not just trade him. I would stick with a better plan and understand this season's going to be rough because it's going to be rough anyway.
Definitely rough sledding ahead for the LA Lakers. It's going to be some must-watch TV, though. And at some point, I desperately want to see all 3 guards on the floor together. Dennis
you will,
Schroder,
because they're going to have to go
Westbrook.
so small. They're going to have to go so small to get these guys on the floor. And, they're talking about Beverly as a wing defender, using Reeves on the wing, using Lonnie Walker on the wing, and basically turning their, parade of 6'3", 6'4", and under players into their 1, 2, 3 their guards and small forwards, because that's the most stuff that they have.
Can guards play on the wings? Will Russell Westbrook continue to be an LA Laker, or will some team somewhere decide to step up to the plate with a palatable offer for the Lakers organization that Rob Pelinka is amenable to? You're going to have us covered for all that and more over at Locked On Lakers. Brian, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks, Jackson.